So now we're come to the key differences and disagreements between Freud and Jung. And one of the central disagreements between Jung and Freud was their differing conceptions of the unconscious mind. So let's take a look, first of all, at Freud's position. So Freud believed the unconscious mind was the epicenter of our repressed thoughts, traumatic memories, and fundamental drives of sex and aggression. He saw it as a storage facility for all hidden sexual desires, resulting in neurosis, or what we would call nowadays mental illness. He declared that the human mind centers upon three structures: the id, the ego, and the superego. Now, here is a popular metaphor that Freud commonly used to help delineate how he viewed the human psyche. So in this image, the upper part of the iceberg on the surface represents consciousness, which denotes visibility, awareness. The realm of the conscious mind consists of those thoughts that are the focus of our attention here and now, that which is perceivable. The preconscious consists of all which can be retrieved with mental effort, so memories and stored knowledge. The third and most significant region is that of the unconscious mind, and here lie the processes that are the real cause of most behavior, according to Freud. And like an iceberg, the most important part of the mind is the part that you can't see. The unconscious mind acts as a repository of primitive wishes and impulses kept at bay and mediated by the preconscious area. So Freud compartmentalized the realms of the psyche based on the cognitive roles that they play, and he ascribed them to distinctive names that I mentioned just a moment ago. The first is known as the id. The id, according to Freud, forms our unconscious drives, mainly sex, and is not bound by morality, but instead only seeks to satisfy pleasure. The ego is our conscious perceptions, memories, and thoughts that enable us to deal effectively with reality. The superego attempts to mediate the drives of the id through socially acceptable behaviors. So let's expand on that a little bit further so we can be clear as to exactly what roles they play. So what is the id? The id is the impulsive part of our psyche, which responds directly and immediately to basic urges, needs, and desires. The personality of a newborn child is all id, and only later does it develop an ego and a superego. The id remains infantile in its function throughout a person's life and does not change with time or experience, as it is not in touch with the external world. The id is not affected by reality, logic, or the everyday world, as it operates within the unconscious part of the mind. The ego develops to mediate between the unrealistic id and the external real world. It is the decision-making component of personality. Ideally, the ego works by reason, whereas the id is chaotic and unreasonable. Like the id, the ego seeks pleasure and avoids pain. But unlike the id, the ego is concerned with devising a realistic strategy to obtain the pleasure. The superego's function is to control the id's impulses, especially those which society forbids, such as sex and aggression. It also has the function of persuading the ego to turn to moralistic goals rather than simply realistic ones, and to strive for perfection. The superego consists of two systems: the conscious and the ideal self. The conscience, can punish the ego through causing feelings of guilt. For example, if the ego gives in to the id's demands, the superego may make the person feel bad through guilt. The ideal self is an imaginary picture of how you would ought to be and represents career aspirations, how to treat other people, and how to behave as a member of society.